The condemnation notice snapped in the wind, where it was stapled to the barn door, and a man in a hard hat stood beside a bulldozer idling at the edge of the gravel road, tapping his clipboard against his thigh. "It's a hazard," he said, loud enough for the small crowd gathered at the fence line to hear. "Rotted through. Should have come down years ago." Odessa Marsh stood in the barn's doorway, with her hand flat against the wood, feeling the grain under her palm the way she had every morning for 61 years. A neighbor lifted a phone to record the bulldozer's engine idling behind her. The narrator let the moment settle before promising, low and unwavering, that the barn everyone wanted flattened by sundown would still be standing a year from now, and every single person laughing at the fence line would know exactly why. A voice cut in immediately, tight with disbelief. "They brought a bulldozer to an old woman's barn?" Before she even said a word, I got questions already. Odessa's grandfather Elias Marsh had built that barn with his own hands in 1871, 6 years after emancipation, on 80 acres he'd bought outright with money saved working other men's fields. The kind of black land ownership that drew resentment from neighbors for 100 years after. Odessa herself had spent 30 years as a historic preservation architect for the state office, before retiring, quietly certifying barns and farmhouses just like this one, all across 3 counties, though nobody in town had ever bothered to ask what she did before she moved home to care for the land. She kept her old badge and certification papers in a drawer she never opened for company. Her grandson Marcus called every evening at 6, steady as a clock, the one voice that reminded her she wasn't as alone in this fight as the fence line made her feel. Gary Holt, the county councilman pushing hardest for the demolition, had his eye on the acreage for a strip mall development, and he'd made no secret of thinking Odessa was simply a stubborn old woman standing in the way of progress. Gary's first move was procedural, the condemnation notice nailed up without so much as a courtesy call, citing structural hazard on a barn that had never once been formally inspected. His second move came at a county meeting 2 weeks later, where he held up a photograph of the barn's sagging roofline and told the room, "We're talking about a safety issue, not sentiment, and I think everyone here knows exactly what kind of stubbornness we're dealing with." And a few chuckles rippled through the crowd like it was the easiest thing in the world to laugh at. Odessa sat near the back in her good coat and said nothing, her hands folded tight in her lap. Gary's third move was sharper. He had the county deny her repair permit outright, citing the same unverified hazard designation, closing off her only legal path to save the structure herself. The reactor voice broke through here, sharp and disbelieving. "Wait, he denied her the permit to fix it, but he's fine tearing it down? Y'all catching that math?" Gary's fourth move crossed every remaining line. He scheduled the demolition crew for a Tuesday morning, without public notice, arriving with the bulldozer already running, banking on nobody showing up in time to stop it. The reversal started the moment the crew's foreman, moving fast to beat any legal challenge, put a crowbar to a warped section of the barn's north wall to test its stability, and the old boards cracked open wider than anyone expected, revealing a hollow cavity built into the frame itself. Inside sat a rusted iron strongbox, and beneath it, carved directly into a support beam, a set of initials and a date. EM, 1871. A neighbor's teenage daughter, phone already out from filming the bulldozer, caught the whole thing on video without meaning to, the crew's own voices audible arguing over what to do with it. Word reached the State Historic Preservation Office by that afternoon, and Odessa's former colleague, a sharp, no-nonsense reviewer named Patricia Alvarez, drove out herself within the hour. She knelt at the opened wall, examined the strongbox's contents, original land deeds and hand-forged tools dated to the earliest years after emancipation, and turned to the small crowd that had gathered. "Do any of you understand what's sitting in front of you?" she asked. "This is one of the best documented free black homestead structures left standing in this state." Then she turned to Odessa and asked, almost gently, why she'd never once mentioned her 30 years certifying exactly this kind of building. Gary, standing near his idling bulldozer, went pale as the crowd's attention swung fully toward him, and Patricia played the teenager's video for the county board that same week. The crew's own recorded words about the demolition timeline laid bare for everyone to hear. The county board demanded Gary apologize publicly before any further action could proceed, and what came out of him was thin and grudging. "I didn't realize the history here. I'm sorry if I moved too fast." Odessa looked at him for a long moment and said only, You didn't need to know the history to ask me a single question first. You just didn't think I was worth asking. The reactor voice returned quieter now, almost hushed. You just didn't think I was worth asking. Okay, I need a second after that one. Gary was censured by the county board within the month and lost his committee seat over the unauthorized demolition order, and the state opened a review into 2 other properties he'd pushed toward condemnation using the same unverified hazard claims. The barn was placed on the State Historic Register within the year, fully restored under Odessa's own supervision, now standing as an education center where local schoolchildren learn the history of Reconstruction-era Black land ownership firsthand. Odessa didn't keep the money the state preservation grant offered for the restoration surplus. She redirected it into a legal aid fund helping Black landowning families across the county fight fraudulent condemnation claims, exactly like the one that had nearly taken her grandfather's barn. Marcus stood beside her at the education center's opening, the same iron strongbox displayed behind glass at the entrance, and Odessa ran her hand along the restored north wall, the way she had the doorframe 61 years earlier. Steady, sure, home. The reactor voice closed it out, warm and direct. Now look, this one's fiction. I wrote every word of it. But you already know somewhere out there a real barn like this one is standing right now with a bulldozer parked in front of it. So tell me in the comments, has somebody ever tried to erase something in your family before they even bothered to understand it? Like this video if it hit you, share it with somebody who needs to hear it today, and subscribe, because we've got more of these stories on the way.